Writing in a blog post, some folks are even making outrageous claims that the new coronavirus causing the pandemic was engineered in a lab and deliberately released to make people sick. A new study debunks such claims by providing scientific evidence that this novel coronavirus arose naturally. It is beyond disturbing that Dr. Francis Collins, one of our country's most senior public health officials, would put out such cynical and dishonest misinformation. His statement conflated two totally different theories to cast doubt on the credible one. We've never said the pandemic virus was, quote, deliberately released to make people sick, but we, Dr. Redfield, and now many others are saying it did likely leak from a lab, accidentally. And what study is Francis Collins talking about to support his claims of a natural origin? The reassuring findings, he says, are the result of genomic analyses conducted by an international research team, partly supported by NIH. And now we get to the central structural barrier to efforts to establish the true origins of this pandemic. The NIH is using a study that it helped pay for to deny that the pandemic virus was engineered in a lab, despite the fact that the virus was massively more contagious and more perfectly suited for infecting the human respiratory system than any previously observed virus. And despite the fact that its first outbreak was in the one place in the world where gain-of-function virus research was being carried out to make a virus more contagious and more perfectly suited for infecting the human respiratory system. And who commissioned and funded that research? Our own NIH, run by Francis Collins, and NIAID, run by Fauci. So they pay for the research that we now know could have started the pandemic, and then they pay for a study that proves it wasn't them. How can we trust these people? In July 2014, a group of scientists from around the world came together and set up the Cambridge Working Group to voice their concerns about gain-of-function research. Later that year, the Obama administration placed a complete moratorium on it, quote, following recent biosafety incidents at federal research facilities. The moratorium was lifted in 2017. But gain-of-function research always had two high-profile supporters, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins. In 2011, they wrote an article literally saying that generating a potentially dangerous virus in the laboratory is a risk worth taking. This week, one of the very few journalists who has actually tried to investigate all this, Josh Rogin, who earlier reported on safety risks at the Wuhan lab, had this to say on Megyn Kelly's podcast.
The head of the entire field really is Anthony Fauci. He's the godfather of gain-of-function research as we know it.
We reached out to close to 100 people who were part of the Cambridge Working Group to get their thoughts on the mounting pile of evidence about the pandemic's true origin. Surely if they raised the alarm about the dangers of gain-of-function research in 2014, they'd be even more anxious to tell the world about it now, when the very thing they warned about looks like it might have happened. But hardly any would go on the record with us. One of them was Rutgers University's Dr. Richard E. Bright. He told us that the 2019 renewal of a research project commissioned by Dr. Fauci and subcontracted to the Wuhan Institute of Virology unequivocally included gain-of-function research of concern, his words, and should have been flagged for review. Why were so many others afraid to talk? Here's Josh Rogin again.
I often talk to scientists who say the same thing. They say, listen, we really want to speak out about this, but we can't do it. Why can't we do it? Well, we get all of our funding from NIH or NIAID, which is run by Dr. Fauci for years and years and years. And so we can't say anything like, oh, gain-of-function research might be dangerous or it might have come from the lab, because we're going to lose our careers.
Exactly. When Fauci and Collins hold up studies or statements from scientists on their payroll as evidence for a natural origins theory, it's a joke. It's the same reason we can't take the WHO investigation seriously. Peter Daszak, the man who subcontracted Fauci's research to the Wuhan lab in the first place, was the only US representative on the investigative team. We have to get to the bottom of this, not to point fingers, but to help prevent the next pandemic. And as Josh Rogin made clear this week, one of the most disturbing aspects of this whole story is the media cover-up.
Dr. Fauci, the hero of the pandemic, might also have had a role in the research that may have caused the pandemic. You know, people can't get it through their heads, but that's the reality. We don't have a media environment where we can have that kind of discussion.
Today, Fauci was on all the Sunday shows. Guess how many times he was asked about this? 0. Chuck Todd, Dana Bash, Margaret Brennan, Martha Raddatz, none of them did their job. None of them dared go against the cult of Fauci. This will not stand. We will keep going with our investigation. We will keep pushing for a full independent investigation. This pandemic has killed over 2 million people and turned the world upside down. If there's even a remote possibility that it started with risky experiments commissioned by our own government, experiments which could still be going on, we need to know.